Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So as you may have been able to tell from the intro montage, we have a new project in the shop. And it is this absolutely beautiful 98 RSP or Royal Sapphire Pearl Mark IV Supra. So we'll get to what's under the hood here in a few moments, but let's just take a minute to go around this thing and look at how beautiful it is. And pretty much every spot on this car you could eat off of. It's just one of, if not the best example of a Mark IV Supra that I've ever had the pleasure of having in the shop and in short order working on. So this car is owned by my friend Russ up at Accelerated Performance. And you guys may remember him when my Supra was getting wired. He's actually the guy who did the wiring on it. He is one of the owners of Accelerated Performance, and he is one of the best kind of jack of all trades that I've ever encountered. He can wire, he can build engines, he's into Tiffany lamps of all things, and he's a really good dude, and I'm really happy to have this car in the shop. So, kind of the genesis of this car, Russ had a really, really nice concourse level restored Porsche 911. I believe it was a late 60s or early 70s one. He can correct me on that, as I'm not a Porsche guy, but this car was absolutely beautiful, and he went through it with as fine-toothed of a comb as you could possibly go through one of those cars. The car was beautiful, but he got to the point where it was so nice that he almost couldn't drive it around and do anything with it. So that car was sold, and this car came into his possession. So he spent a large amount of time searching around all the different listings and everything that he could possibly find for Mark IV Supras, and he was very particular about what he was looking for with a car. He wanted as close to a stock example as he could possibly find to do kind of a staged build with. He did the BPU thing for a little while last year, and that's basic performance upgrade for those of you that are unfamiliar with Supra nomenclature. And that's essentially an exhaust and intake and intercooler, kind of all the really basic mods you can do to these cars. And back in the day, that's where everybody started out at with these. So it went through the genesis of a BPU car for a while, but he always had the intent to do a larger build on it. And at this point in time, that larger build is in the midst of happening right now, but by and large it has taken place, and what's under the hood of this car is pretty special at this point in time. So this color that this car is one of the rare Mark IV Supra colors, and there were a few of them that were kind of a limited edition and limited production numbers throughout the years. This RSP color is one of them. Quicksilver FX is another one, and that is actually under the layer of dust what the Mark II is painted, and we did that to kind of pay homage to the Mark IVs, just with the Mark II. There's also a number of other colors. My Mark IV is Alpine Silver. The red that you guys may associate with Supras is Renaissance Red. There was Baltic Blue, Imperial Jade Mica, that's a green, deep jewel green, which is a green obviously. And which ones am I forgetting? I can't remember the name of the white that they came in, or the black, but they did come in a wide variety of different colors, but some of them were limited model years, limited production, so on and so forth. And this RSP color is one of the most desirable out there. It's a beautiful kind of blurple color, and the shop lights don't do it really any justice, but you can see that it's kind of blue. Out in the sunlight, it looks kind of purple, and there's almost some like red and pink and purple flakes in it. It's just a beautiful color, and it serves the body lines of these cars very, very well. So when Russ got this car, it was an original TT car, an original auto car, and at this point in time, he has done a manual conversion to the car, and he kept with the true Supra heritage, and this car has a Getrag V160 in it that he sent out to a guy in England named Paul Cheshire, who does really high-end, meticulous rebuilds on the Supra V160s and V161s, as well as a number of other transmissions from what I gather. So it is not a cheap service to have done, but it is one that's necessary if you want to rebuild your V160, as it's hard to find the parts for them at this point in time, and there aren't very many people out there that are willing to work on them. So from what Russ has said, the transmission drives phenomenally. Paul did a phenomenal job with it, and I still have my V160 sitting right here underneath a thick layer of dust, but this transmission will at some point in time end up going out to Paul to have it refreshed in order to go into my SC300 at some point in the future. So now that we've done kind of a basic overview on this car, let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room. Let's pop the hood and talk about what the car is here for, as it certainly isn't just another garage ornament. This is the next build series on this channel, and it's one that I am extraordinarily excited for. Under the hood of Russ's car is just as clean as the rest of it. And this looks a little bit different than your normal 2JZ setup, as he's used a few different and newer parts for it. So we'll talk about those in a minute, but first we will start on the hot side over here. So this is a Garrett G45 1500 sitting atop one of my Gen R T4 twin scroll manifolds, and you can see that the compressor outlet does run into the wastegate provision, or the forward wastegate provision, and I'm actually going to modify that and more than likely end up modifying my fixturing and my manifold process, so that way this won't be an issue moving forward with these large frame T4 turbos. It's always been one of the things that I've put the warning on the note rather, on the product listing, that you would have to cut this V-band flange off and put an extension tube going downwards, but I can modify this, and the fact that Russ's car is as complete as it is, I can ensure that when I do modify that, and if I do refixture, that it clears both the Mark IV chassis and then my Mark III front clip that is over right there. So beyond that, he has two of Garrett's new 45mm wastegates and a very nicely heat-shielded T4 twin scroll turbine housing. So this is a really cool setup. This will make really good power, and it looks appropriate having this large of a turbo under the hood of this Supra. Now, these G45 1500s, excuse me, it is a 76mm compressor wheel, and I guess I could count the number of blades on there, but you guys can pause and do that as well. There's a large number of them, and that turbo is going to do some serious work with the engine and the rest of the setup. So the engine is a 3.4 liter, so it's a stroker 2JZ. It's a steel rod. I think he said it's a 9-to-1 or 10-to-1, or it has 9-to-1 or 10-to-1 pistons in it. Ported head. I don't remember what cams are in it, but having a little bit more displacement with this turbo, it's going to be pretty responsive, and it'll make a ton of power if he wants it to. So sitting atop the engine, we have CNC Innovations valve covers, coil pack cover, and one of their quote-unquote dual plenum intake manifolds. Now, I say quote-unquote because the manifold itself, it is not a true dual plenum intake manifold. It looks like it is from the outside, but Russ sent me photos of it disassembled, and while a true dual plenum intake manifold has a separated primary plenum that the throttle body feeds into, and then a small slit going along the, I guess the joining or the transitional part between the primary plenum and the secondary plenum. Now, this is a technology and an idea that they used in some older WRC cars, and the idea has a lot of merit behind it, where in theory you achieve more equal air distribution across all of the cylinders and less air turbulence in the secondary plenum that is actually feeding each of the intake ports on the head. Now, that isn't his main concern with this setup, as he was more concerned with putting an aftermarket intake manifold that looked cool, but still kept the throttle body in a location where he did not have to cut a hole in the chassis to run an intercooler tube through it. So this manifold, albeit not a true dual plenum intake manifold, will do its job perfectly fine, and it checked the boxes that he was after with not cutting holes in the chassis. Now, beyond the specifics of the engine, you can see titanium used throughout. He has this titanium like air baffle plate on the front here, titanium upper intercooler, or upper radiator hose rather, a ton of titanium fasteners the whole way around the cam gears, holding the intake manifold together, the actual oil fill cap, and you can see, if I can zoom in, accelerated performance is etched onto the side of that, which is a pretty cool little detail there. Valve covers, titanium fasteners. The intake manifold itself, titanium fasteners holding it to the cylinder head. Titanium radiator hold downs or tie downs. Pretty much all of the fasteners around here are all titanium. Everything that you see in that pretty blue burnt color, it's all titanium. And that, I guess, leads us into what is the car here for? And it may be no surprise with what I was just talking about, but it is here for a litany, a huge laundry list of titanium work. So in looking at this car, what do we have missing from it being a completed engine bay? Well, we're missing intercooler tubing, we're missing an intake tube, we are missing a downpipe, we are missing wastegate dump tubes, and we are missing a mid-pipe and the rest of the exhaust. So the exhaust, he brought this with him, which I haven't even unwrapped it to see what brand it is, but there is a 4-inch titanium catback for this car that I will be connecting the dots between the turbine outlet and that catback exhaust with a combination of a titanium downpipe and titanium midpipe. Now, he wants this car to be quiet and civilized, or at least as much as it can be, so the midpipe will have a secondary muffler in it to kind of tame it down a little bit and make it a little bit more livable and enjoyable for him to drive around. Now, the rest of the work that needs to be done will be some pretty cool parts. And although I'm not happy about it, we discussed and I decided to do some titanium pie cuts for him, as it's something that he really wanted for this car. And he's helped me out enough, and this car is special enough where I will suck it up and do some pie cuts, and it'll be kind of like good old times with all of the titanium pie cuts that I've done over the years on my Mark IV. So we have a 3-inch hot side intercooler tube that will come down, snake underneath of the frame rail in the chassis, and make its way up to this coupler that is through the air dam right there. It's a little bit difficult to see right now. He has a Greddy intercooler on the car, and that will be more than enough for what he's trying to do. Over on this side, he has an aluminum Greddy intercooler tube that comes up pretty much from, I guess you can see the coupler down here, but from right there over to what would be the intercooler outlet, there's that Greddy aluminum tube that runs over to there. And housed on that will be this Bubba Sonic TurboSmart blow-off valve. That he wanted something kind of big and in your face, and that's exactly what he got with this. It has a really cool outlet horn or funnel or whatever you want to call it, and that'll go on that aluminum intercooler tube. But from that coupler up to this flange on the throttle body right here, that will be a titanium tube, and this top section will have a pie cut section coming off of it, going down to where it mates up with that coupler down there. The other pie cut section will be the intake tube, and this will have a 5-inch tube coming over this way. Somewhere in this area, a large air filter will be housed, and pretty much the two most visible titanium tubes on this will have pie cut sections, as that's what he wanted, and for all intents and purposes, it will look really cool, especially if we pick a nice blue anodized finish on it to match the rest of the fasteners and accessories that he has on here. It'll look sweet, and it'll be a really nice touch to this engine bay. So the downpipe and the wastegate dump tubes, those will be pretty cool and something that I'm looking forward to knocking out. The downpipe will be a 4-inch downpipe that'll fit down through this void right here, kind of a normal, typical Supra setup. And the wastegate dump tubes will be recirculated. So everybody loves atmospheric dump tubes until you drive a car around often with them. And they get really loud, really noisy, and they can get really dirty as well. And with how clean this car is, he doesn't want a bunch of soot going all over the bottom of the car. So to alleviate that from happening, the best way to do it is to recirc the dump tubes. So I'll be doing this in a manner that is a little bit different than the way that I've recirced dump tubes in the past. Now, I guess we can use my Supra for an example. Normally, when I build recirculated dump tubes, you can see they have flex bellows in them. They are V-banded down at, or they have two V-bands rather, one at the wastegate outlet and then one at the recirc stubs that go into the downpipe itself. If I zoom in, you guys can see all of that down in there. Now, titanium ends up being a little bit different as you are trying to do that, as you can't easily source, or at least I couldn't source through Taycan, titanium flex bellows. So what we're going to do is use a slip joint in lieu of using the flex bellows. Now, I've built a number of downpipe setups and hot part setups for my manifolds in the past. And what I normally do is build an elbow for this the rearmost wastegate that just connects and goes directly into the downpipe. The front wastegate, I usually will build a removable tube, so that way you're not trying to snake this really oddly shaped wastegate recirc tube connected to a downpipe and everything. It would be a nightmare to try to fit all of that in there. As opposed to if I make that front recirc tube removable, then it makes the installation of everything that much easier. And it'll be pretty cool to work with a slip joint that way as well, as frankly I haven't had the opportunity to do so with any of the titanium projects that I've done thus far. So we have that to look forward to, and that'll be a really cool touch and a really cool part that I am very, very excited for. So there may end up being some other odds and ends that I will need to knock out on this car while it's here, but what we've covered so far are at least the wave tops of what I'll be working on with this project. And it'll be really cool, it'll be really exciting, and anytime I get to work with titanium on this scale, and especially with a car that is this clean and at this high of a level, is always a cool experience and always welcomed around here. So with Russ's car up in the air now, we can get a look underneath of it and see what a really clean Supra looks like. And there's some pretty cool bits under here that you can see, I guess, right there, some titanium T-bolt clamps. Pretty nice touch. You can see a nice Autobahn Motorsports deep oil pan for it that gives you a little bit more oil capacity, and it's obviously a nice billet aluminum piece. You can see here Paul's beautiful work with the restoration of this transmission, complete with a billet center section, which V160s and V161s, if you are going to break any of the actual cases, that center case is the weak link. So Russ opted to upgrade that. Nice touch, nice idea to do so. You can see the bleeder for the clutch right there, and you can see this transmission. You could eat a meal from a Michelin restaurant off of it if you wanted to. So moving back, there's no rust, no craziness or anything like that under here. Just a really clean, really high quality car. Now, the exhaust will run in kind of the typical Supra way. It'll come down along through this pocket, snake over, snake straight, and then somewhere kind of in this void right here is where I'll end up placing the primary or the first muffler. And from there, the tubing will snake down around, go back out to the rear of the car to wherever this catback lands, and I'll just have to connect the dots and make everything fit. And I'll more than likely end up having to cut a pretty significant section off of this catback to make this work, but we can make it quiet, make it civilized for him, and make it something that he actually enjoys driving. So the car currently has a factory drive shaft in it, which that'll be swapped out at some point in time. The actual third member, or the differential itself, is a TRD diff, which those are nearly impossible to find at this point in time, and if you do find them, people want a very pretty penny for them. He got a good deal on this, and now he has a diff that should hold up to the power that that engine actually creates. Now, other details, he has these pretty cool little radium line holders, so they hold the factory brake lines and maybe one of the factory fuel lines, as well as the AN lines that he has running up to the front of the car for his fuel system. Another little Radium filter setup right here. Radium makes really nice stuff if you guys have not seen their products before. And you can see it right off of the filter, it wise to feed both of the fuel rails up top with their own individual feed line, rather than feeding through one rail to the other. That's the more advantageous way to do that. You don't have to deal with pressure drop across the fuel rails or fuel starvation in either of the rails and odd fuel delivery that way. So good on him for doing it that way. And yeah, I cannot wait to start working on this thing and seeing it come together. So that more or less covers Russ's car, the plan for it, and what we have to look forward to with this build series. Like I've said multiple times throughout this video so far, I am very excited to work on this car, very happy to have the opportunity to build parts for it. And by the time everything is said and done, it'll take this very special car and make it just that little bit more special with some crazy one-off titanium parts, and the attention to, hopefully my attention to detail can complement his, and hopefully I can do this beautiful car justice with the work that I'm doing on it. So even though we have another Supra in the shop and another project to knock out, there is still plenty happening with the two silver cars just in the background for the next little while. So these boxes over here, there's all kinds of goodies and all kinds of cool stuff that we will open up and talk about and use to knock out projects on the Mark II in the near future, and we have some things coming up for the Mark IV as well to get it the rest of the way race ready, as the race season is approaching very rapidly, and I really want to get out and make some passes with that car this year. But like I said, for the next little while, the focus will be on Russ's car, getting it knocked out and squared away. And I hope that you guys are looking forward to coming along on this journey with me. So with all of that being said, I think that'll be about the end of this episode. So thank you guys, as always, for coming along on all these different journeys with me, all these different adventures, and seeing all the crazy things that have gone on here and continue to go on here. So to have the opportunity to work on a car like this 5 or 10 years ago, I never would have thought that would be the case. But here we are now, getting to work on a pristine, very rare example of a Mark IV. And I'm not bragging whatsoever right now. It's just cool to see something in the shop that when I was a kid, this is just something that I would have dreamed of. And now I get to get my own 2 hands on it. I get to build parts for it. And it's something really cool, and something that kid Alex would be very appreciative and happy of adult Alex for having the opportunity to do this. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you guys very much for coming on all these different journeys with me. I thank Russ for the opportunity to work on this car, and I look forward to it in the very near future. But before I drone on any more, that will be about the end of this episode. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, and I will see you all in the next episode.